Reuven ben Labish and Ed Goldberg's cousin Nisan Hara ben Fardosa. Paul and Bob Bromberg in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malcolm Mann in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Peres, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, Cheryl Shur, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Arav Akiva, Marsha Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel ben Harav Shimon. A month of learning by Chaim and Phyllis Reese, in memory of his father, Mordechai ben Yom Tov Lipa, by Phyllis and Chaim Reese, in memory of her father, Pinchas ben Abraham. That is it. May the Shem and Leah, Crank Raphael, Velti Yeshua, and Oben Israel, a good gebenched Yah.
Amen.
All right. Erwin, thank you also for letting me pull out this morning. Okay. I commented to Marty Engel. Marty and I talked a minute or two about the Gemara this morning and indicated that it is not easy material. Okay. And I had encouraged everyone using at least Art Scroll to read the introduction to the Sugya that was found on 14A1 and 14A2. Okay, if you did not have a chance to do that, again, I suggest it would be helpful. Okay, the Gemara basically is trying to deal with a statement. A quick review and then jumping in. A quick review based on Rabbi Hanina Skan HaKohanim, whether it is permitted to burn two items together. On the one hand, it's truma or chometz truma, okay, that has become perhaps questionable as we reach the 6th hour Erev Pesach, versus burning that with any other kind of chometz, okay, truma that is clearly pasul or clearly questionable or clearly tameh, okay? And so that becomes the primary issue, if I can say it that way, of the Gemara. And then from there, it tries to bring the question of the language of the Mishnah, okay? Because in that Mishnah, we see it clearly says, after citing Rabbi Hanina Skan Kohanim's statement, okay, it brings a statement then of Rabbi Akiva, and then a statement by Rabbi Meir, Midivreihem Lamadnu, Sorfim Truma Tahora Im Hatmeya B'Pesach. And so throughout this sugya, we see, number one, who is Rabbi Meir learning from when it says Midivreihem? Okay. Number two, okay, when it says Tahora Im Tmeya B'Pesach, we're going to see that if it's challenged, okay, in terms of Rabbi Yossi, okay, and others, okay. Plus, the Gemara then comes back, the Mishnah came back and said, Modim Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yoshua, Sesorfin Zola Atzmo, Besorfin, okay, Zola Atzmo, v'Zola Atzma, okay, and then goes on from there. So there are a number of different components I'm going to say, to this particular text. Also, what the Gemara is going to bring in is how did these items become tameh, okay? And the fact that there are different three components. Again, there is truma that has to be guarded, okay? And the question there is to whether that truma being guarded applies to not just truma that is tahor, but what about truma in other situations? What if it's tluya? What if it's tameh? Okay. Second of all, another question comes up, as we said, what was midivrehem, from whose language? Okay, did Rabbi Meir draw this? His conclusions. Okay. And finally, another issue being again, okay, if they both agree, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, that they should be burned separately, okay, where is their machloket? Is it as the Mishnah concludes on tluya, truma held in abeyance, and tameh, that those, okay, that's where there's their machloket, or is there more to it than that? Okay, so the entire Gemara tries to deal with these kinds of examples, as well as saying on what do we say, can we give other examples, okay, that help us clarify the situation of this truma that is chametz truma. Okay, so I am going to suggest that we start this morning, even though it's Yud Dalet Amud Beis, where we have about 7 or so lines up from the bottom. Okay, midivreihem, from their words, Daman, according to whom, Ilema midivrei Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim. If we're going to say that it's from the words of Rabbi Chanina, midami, are they really comparable? Hatam, tameh, v'tameh. Okay, that example that we gave, okay, previously was example of two items that were both tameh. Hacha tahor v'tameh. Here, our example is one that item is tahor and one is tameh. Ve'ela midivrei Rabbi Akiva. But rather, perhaps it comes, Rabbi Meir's deriving his statement from the view of Rabbi Akiva. Midami. So Gemara asks again, are they really comparable? Hatam, there in that case, pasul v'tameh. We have one that's unfit. Okay, the oil in the lamp may be unfit, whereas the other is tameh. Hacha tahor v'tameh. In our original case, again, we have tahor and tameh. Gemara continues, Nema kasava Rabbi Meir. Perhaps we should say that Rabbi Meir is of the opinion, matnitin ba'av hatuma deoraita uvlad hatuma de Rabbanan. Maybe our Mishnah is talking about one item that became tameh biblically, and the other, okay, became tameh rabbinically. De midoraita tahor me'alya. Why? Because then, in actuality, that item which is only, I was going to say, tameh rabbinically, Torah-wise, would still be considered tahor. Umay midivrehem. And what then did Rabbi Meir say when he meant from divrehem? Midivrei Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim. Then that would come from the words of Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim. Okay, so the implication being, okay, that clearly as we're trying to determine, Okay, did that mean that meat contaminated rabbinically, okay, would not be burnt with something that was contaminated biblically? Okay, if that's the case. And if so, what about the time frame of Pesach, the 6th hour? Okay. How then would that apply to our case of Tahor Chametz, okay, of Truma, being burnt with something else? Okay. Now, Gemara rejects this and offers another explanation. Amar Reish Lakish Mishum Bar Kapara. So he's going to give another attempt to interpret our Mishnah. Matnitin ba'av hatuma deoraita. Okay, our Mishnah, he says, okay, deals with what Rabbi Hanina is talking about, a situation where the meat, okay, was contaminated from an av tuma, biblically, uvlad hatuma deoraita, and the other meat was contaminated, okay, from a lesser means of tuma, also Torah mandated. Umay midivrehim. And if that's the case, what is the meaning of Rabbi Meir's statement? From their words we learn, midivrei Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Yoshua. Okay, suggesting that it comes from the statement of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. And remember, our Mishnah said, okay, going back real quickly, our Mishnah said, right, Umodim Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yehoshua shesorfin zo la'atzma v'zo la'atzma al ma nechlaku al hatluya v'al hatme'ah. Their only difference, their only machloket, okay, was if the truma was in abeyance, okay, questionable, and truma that was clearly tameh. Sherabi Eliezer Omer Tisarei V'Zola Atzma, V'Zola Atzma, that Rabbi Eliezer felt each of those had to be burnt separately. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Shtehen Ke'achat, and Rabbi Yeshua said the two of them could be burned as one. So did Rabbi Meir learn from this machloket? Is now the explanation that possibly Reish Lakish in the name of Bar Kapara is giving. Ilema ha Rabbi Yehoshua. Okay, if we're saying it's this example of Rabbi Yehoshua, Ditznan, okay, are we saying then that it's this case, this other Mishnah, where we find Rabbi Yehoshua teaching, Chavit shel truma, shenolad la safek tuma, okay? If we have here, right, a barrel, right, of truma, and it is questionably tame, okay? So we're looking at a situation where it's vulnerable or exposed, okay? And is it pure or impure? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, says Rabbi Eliezer, in this new Mishnah that we're trying to compare to their other machloket in our Mishnah, Im hayta munachet b'makom haturpa, if this barrel, okay, of questionable, let's say, oil, right, is in an exposed or vulnerable place, yinichena b'makom hamutzna, one should put it in a secure location. In other words, implying that even questionable truma needs to be protected, needs to be guarded. Ve'im hayta megula yechasena. And if it is open, in other words, revealed, it should be covered. On the other hand, Rabbi Yoshua says, Im hayta munachet b'makom hamutzna, if this questionable barrel of, say, wine or oil, truma, okay, is in an open place, is in a secure place, since it's already questionable as to whether it's tameh or tahor, right? What should you do? You should clarify its status and make it clearly one way, namely, yinichena b'makom haturpa, namely move it into an exposed area, which would therefore clearly make it tameh, and as a result, one would not have to protect it or guard it. Ve'im hayta mechusa, and if it's covered, yigalena, one should then make it open, reveal it. Okay? So our Gemara now asks, midami, okay? Do we say that these situations of this example is really similar to the machloket that we have of the two of them in our Mishnah? Okay. What happens, says the Gemara, as follows. Must we protect it, this uncertain truma, or not? So the Gemara continues. Hatam, there, namely in our case, where we're talking about the produce, garma ba'alma. You could say it's passive causation, okay? It just could happen, right? There's no clear personal act. Hacha, but in this particular machloket that we just referred to, biyadayim, it's with their hands. Namely, there is a personal causative act that's going to cause it, okay? That's going to make it tameh. Therefore, we can't say that we can learn from this example of a machloket between them to ours. Okay? Therefore, it does not give us clear proof that when Rabbi Meir said midivreihem, it's based on the machloket of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. Therefore, the Gemara continues, Ella, rather, Rabbi Yehoshua. Maybe this example of a Mishnah that includes Rabbi Yehoshua is the basis from which we can learn. D'Tnan, as taught in this Mishnah, Chavit shel Truma. Okay, we have again a barrel of Truma wine in this case. Shenishbara begat ha'elyona. And the barrel broke open in the upper, I'll call it vat, okay? Part of the vat, of the wine vat. V'tachtona chulim tme'in, okay? And the lower part of the vat, where the wine is collected, okay, contains wine that is chulin and it's tameh. Something happened to it. A zav touched it, an animal, a sheretz, who knows what. Modeh Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, the two of them agree. She'im yachol lahatzil mimena revi'it b'tahara, yatzil. That if he can save from the broken vat using a tahor vessel, a revi'is of that wine, he should save it. Ve'im lav, and if not, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, says Rabbi Eliezer, tereid v'titma va'al yitma'ena biyad, that he should allow it simply to flow out and become tameh, the tahor wine from the barrel, and therefore it flows out of it by itself, and therefore does not become tameh as caused by his own hand. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, says Rabbi Yoshua Omer, af yitma'ena bayad. Rabbi Yoshua says, basically, if that wine from the upper barrel is going to eventually become tameh, even though it's tahor now, maybe it's better to go and get even a tameh vessel and collect it. But then in doing so, you are actually causing by your action that wine coming out of the barrel in the upper vat to become tameh. That's a causative action. Ihachi. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, hai midivrehem, then that phrase from their words that Rabbi Meir said he learned from, midvarav mebayele. It should have instead said not that he learned it from their words, but from his, namely Rabbi Yoshua's words, he learned it. Hachi ka'amar. This is what it means to tell us. Meimachlo katan shel Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yoshua lamanu. It's from their argument, perhaps is what Rabbi Meir means when he said he learned it from them. Daikanami. And maybe we can even deduce this exactly from the language. Dekatani, because our Mishnah taught, Modeh Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yoshua, that both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua acknowledged Shma Mina. And indeed, we can learn from that. V'chein amar Rav Nachman. And likewise, Rav Nachman said, Amar Rabba bar Abuha, in the name of Rabbi Abba bar Abuha, Matnitin ba'av hatuma de'oraita. Our Mishnah deals with one case of something becoming tameh, okay, from an av tuma, therefore it's first level tuma biblically, uvlad hatuma de'oraita, and the other item becoming tameh from a secondary level of tuma, also biblically. Therefore, when you combine them, basically what happens, all right, they become still a second level. Umay midivrehim. And what do we mean then from their words? Midivrei Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yoshua. From the words of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. So we try to see that that's what Rabbi Meir's source was, to say, okay, what do you have to be done in our Mishnah? However, Gemara challenges that as the source. Eitive Rava l'Rav Nachman. Rava challenges Rav Nachman with the following. Okay? So again, still dealing with our subject of the burning of chametz truma. Amar Rabbi Yossi, says Rabbi Yossi, ein hanidun domeh l'ra'aya. That which we're talking about, namely our subject of burning chametz truma, okay, is not similar to what's been cited. Shekesheheidu rabotainu, because when the rabbis gave testimony, al ma heidu, what did they testify? Im al habasar shenitma bivlad hatuma, rather on meat, right? That became tameh based on, okay, a secondary source of tuma. Shesofino to im habasar shenitma ba'av hatuma, with meat again that had become tameh from a primary source of tuma. Zeh tameh v'zeh tameh. The two items are each tameh. Right? And so at best, if you burn them together from something that's a first source and a second source, the end result is still only a second source. Imal Hashemen shenifsal b'tvul yom. But if we're talking about an example like what Rabbi Akiva said, where we're talking about oil that had become unfit because of contact with a tvul yom. Remember, the tvul yom still has some, even though they've immersed, they're not totally tahor till nightfall. And therefore, they still have some bit of tuma associated with them. And thus, by contact with that oil, okay, they render it pasul, unfit for use. Shemadlikino to bener shenitma b'tamei meit, that one would light it in a lamp, okay, that had become tamei through an av tuma, contact with the corpse. In that situation, ze pasul v'ze tamei. One item is unfit, one item is tamei. So it doesn't match up with our earlier example. So the Gemara continues. Af anu modim. So we also, he says, acknowledge. Betruma shenit mate bevlad hatuma. Okay, with regards to truma that became tame by means of a secondary level of tuma. Shesorfino ta im hatruma shenit mate ba'av hatuma. That you may also burn it with truma that became tameh from a primary source of tuma. So that seems to be the statement, that one could burn those two different levels of truma together, and that aval he'ach nisraf hatluya im hatmeya. But how is it possible, I'm going to say, he asks, to burn intermediate truma, intermediate in the sense we don't know whether it's tameh atohor, with truma that is clearly tameh. We might argue, I'm throwing in, that maybe even though it's intermediate, we don't know, it still needs to be shamor, it still needs to be protected. And therefore it cannot be burnt with tameh. Okay? The same way that chametz truma that is tahor cannot be burnt with truma that's tameh. Why? Shema yavo Eliyahu v'yitarena. Perhaps Elijah will come, he said, and make it tahor. Now, what happens? We're going to try to take another example on Tedvav Amud Beis and see if we can learn from this Braita. So the Braita now says to us as follows. Hapigul v'hanotar v'hatame. Meat that has now been considered in the category of pigul, okay, or of notar, left over, or of tameh, for some reason. Beit Shammai omrim ein nisrafin ke'achat. According to Beit Shammai, they cannot be burnt up together. Beit Hillel omrim nisrafin ke'achat. And Beit Hillel says they may be burnt together. Now, Gemara wants to see, from this Braita, is it possible to apply a solution to our statement? Okay, as to number one, was it from Rabbi Chanina that Rabbi Meir learned it? Or was it from Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer? Or could we even say that it could have been from Rabbi Hanina and Rabbi Akiva? Now, the Isalka da'atach, and if you want to assume, if you want to think, Rabbi Meir midivrei Rabbi Yehoshua ka'amar, that Rabbi Meir learned it, so to speak, from Rabbi Yehoshua, is what he said. Amai mahader le Rabbi Yossi mida Rabbi Chanina skan hakohanim. Why then did Rabbi Yossi answer him, refute him, okay, based on what Rabbi Chanina skan hakohanim had said? Because we saw back in our Mishnah, right? Okay. That Rabbi Yossi had said to him, Eina hi hamida, that they did not equate. Umodim Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yoshua. And then the Mishnah went on to say that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua agreed that you burn them separately. Okay? Right? Clearly that truma that's tameh is burnt separately, and truma, chametz truma, okay, that is tahor, has to be burnt separately. Okay? Whereas Rabbi Hanina, remember, had said, Lo nimna lisrof et habasar shenitma bevlad hatuma, im habasar shenitma ba'av hatuma, that they didn't hesitate to burn meat, okay, that was made tameh, okay, from different levels of sources, even though they were adding a level. They were, I don't want to use the word upgrade, but so that was the case, the level of one's tumah. Okay? So that is the question that was asked. Why did Rabbi Yossi challenge him based on the statement of Rabbi Hanina? Amar le Rav Nachman. So now we see Rav Nachman trying to answer, okay, this challenge, right? Rabbi Yossi, lav adate. Maybe it's possible that Rabbi Yossi did not have Rabbi Meir's reasoning in mind. Dehu sava Rabbi Meir, midivrei Chanina skan hakohanim ka'amar. That perhaps, right, Rav Nachman is saying, Rabbi Yossi may have thought that Rabbi Meir's intent, his mindset, was on what Rabbi Chanina had said. Va'amarle, and he said back to him, Ana mida Rabbi Yoshua ka'aminale. Okay, and therefore, right, he answered back to Rav Nachman that no, that Rabbi Yossi didn't have Rabbi Chanina's concept in mind, but he had Rabbi Yoshua's concept in mind. Va'amarle, and now Rabbi Yossi says back to Rabbi Meir, Va'afilu le Rabbi Yoshua, even according to Rabbi Yoshua, Nami eina hi hamida. Again, here too, he's challenging him that there is no comparison. They're not similar issues. Daha modeh Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yoshua shesoref zo b'fnei atzma v'zo b'fnei atzma. Because it's clear that our Mishnah said that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua agreed to say that this is to be burnt separate and this is to be burnt separate. Va'amai einahi hamida. But the Gemara challenges and says, why do you say that this isn't a parallel case? Right? Midah umidahi. But instead, it seems that it is appropriately parallel, because one could actively render it impure if ultimately it becomes impure by itself. Right? This parallel seem fair. So Gemara answers, Shani hata, but it's different there. The Ika if hefseid chulin. Why? Because we could argue that in the case there, okay, of the example we brought previously with the wine that was tameh and chulin wine that was tameh, that you'd have the entire loss, okay? In other words, of that. Why? Because number one, you certainly couldn't sell it to Kohanim, okay? And the question, it would be questionable if you could sell it to Israelites, Yisraelim. Okay? Now, the Gemara continues. Matkifla Rav Yirmiyah. And Rav Yirmiyah challenged this issue because he said, look at it. Our Mishnah, Matnitin Nami Ika Hefseid. But our Mishnah also refers to a situation of a loss. Namely, if you say that you, basically coming back to our example, okay, of either the bright at the top of the Amud, that you have to burn these items separately as opposed to burning them all together, aren't you going to waste wood? Right? So what do you have? Hefseid de eitzim, a loss also of wood. So the Gemara now tells us, however, Amar le hahu saba, that one of the elders, however, said to Rav Yirmiyah, lehefseid meruba chashashu, to a major loss the rabbis were concerned. Lehefseid mu'at lo chashashu, but to a small loss, just for the loss of some wood, that isn't major enough. But the loss of revenue from being able to sell wine, certainly to both Kohanim as well as perhaps Yisraelim, that is a major loss. So now, Amar Rav Asi. Rav Asi joins the discussion and says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, in regards to our Mishnah, maybe we can learn an explanation based on the view of Rabbi Yochanan. B'machloket, okay? That maybe what we're seeing here is in regards to the argument, okay, of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir. B'sheish, their argument really revolved around the fact of the time of burning at the beginning of the 6th hour to destroy the chametz. Okay? Aval b'sheva, but if you were talking about destroying it later in the day, at the 7th hour, where already, okay, that chametz truma from our original Mishnah, okay, is already prohibited. But deoraita, it's already prohibited. Okay, and therefore, certainly it would not need to be protected, guarded. And so therefore, divrei hakol surfin. Therefore, everybody could be in agreement that it's all right then to burn that chametz truma that became tameh from one level with any other truma that became tameh from a different level, and burn it all together. Now, Amale Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera suggests as follows, the Rabbi Asi. Nema kasava Rabbi Yochanan. Shall we say then that Rabbi Yochanan must have been of the opinion to interpret our Mishnah as follows? namely, matnitin ba'av hatuma deoraita, that our Mishnah can be said that the one item, let's say for the sake of discussion that it was the chametz truma initially, became tameh by contact somehow with an av tuma biblically, first level tuma biblically, and the other truma, okay, that was tameh, uvlad hatuma de rabbanan, only became, I put only there, only became tameh based on a rabbinic requirement of tameh. Umay midivrehem. And what do we mean there from their words? What did Rabbi Meir mean when he said that? Midivrei Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim, based on the statement of Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim. Now, what happens? Amar le'en, he said to him, yes. Itmar nami. And it was said on this also the following. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yochanan actually said and taught, matnitin ba'av hatuma deoraita, that our particular Mishnah, okay, right, going back then to the meat, okay, which is what Rabbi Chanina actually referred to at the very beginning, right, of our Mishnah, as I'm jumping back to it, that he said, miyamehem shel kohanim lo nimneu milisrof et habasar shenitma bevlad hatuma. Okay, im habasar shenitma ba'av hatuma. Okay? That's the point. But when he says bevlad hatuma, notice he doesn't say whether it's the Rabbanan or the Oraita. And likewise, when he says shenitma ba'av hatuma, he didn't say whether it was the Oraita or the Rabbanan. So Rabbi Yochanan's explanation attempts to clarify that. Okay? Right? And therefore going on, and yes, itmar nami, it was said also, I'm back in the middle of Tedvav Amud Beis, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, matnitin ba'av hatuma deoraita, that it became tameh from a first level tuma biblically, uvlad hatuma de rabbanan, and the other became tameh, the other piece of meat became tameh from a secondary source of tuma rabbinically. Umay midivrehem. And what did Rabbi Meir then mean when he said from their words? Midivrei Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim. Okay? And from the words of Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim. Umachloket b'shesh. And Rabbi Yochanan then understood it, that the machloket, okay, that was involved here between Rabbi Yossi, right, and Rabbi Meir, was if the question was burning it at the 6th hour. Aval b'sheva, but burning it at the 7th hour, when even, okay, if you will, chametz truma was certainly prohibited d'oraita. Divrei hakol sorfin, that you could burn, everybody agrees you could burn it. So the Gemara then says, Lema misayele. Shall we then say that this supports him? Namely, supports the example, the Braita that we brought earlier as possible proof, namely, hapigul vahanotar vahatame, that meat that was sacrificial for the purposes of sacrifices, that then became pigul, or became notar, or became tamei. Beit Shammai omrim ein nisrafin kechat. Beit Shammai says you cannot burn them all together. Ubeit Hillel omrim nisrafin kechat. And Beit Hillel says they can be burnt all together. Now, Gemara, however, raises a point. Shani hatam. Maybe it's different there in that example brought by the Braita of the three varieties of korbanos that were no longer viable, right? Notar, because it's left over, it's got to be burnt. Tameh, clearly burnt. Pigul also. Something occurred in its process that made the avoda not valid, right? De'it laho, because according to them, namely pigul and notar, tumami de rabbanan, they are now tomei rabbinically. Ditznan is taught elsewhere, hapigul v'hanotar mitam'in et hayadayim. Why? Because they can render an individual's hands tomei. So going on then, lema misayele. Okay, so let's say that the following supports this argument. Okay, so we haven't proved it yet, even from Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation. Okay, so what happens? We're trying another. Hapat she'ifsha v'nifsala mile'echol la'adam v'hakelav yachol la'achla. We have bread that's become moldy, right? And now it's unfit for human consumption, but it is still considered food because it can be consumed by a dog. Mitam'a tumat ochlin bekebetza. Okay, it can become tamei, right? And render other foodstuffs tamei as well, to the amount of one egg. V'nisrefet im hatme'a b'Pesach, and it is to be burnt, okay, with other items that are tamei, okay, on Pesach, an approach of Pesach. But the Gemara says shani hatam. It's different there in the case of the bread. Why? Da'afra ba'almahu. Because maybe we consider that bread like dust. Okay? That it's maybe food, but it's worthless because it's not eligible for human consumption. Ihachi. If that's the case, ma'i modeh. Then why did our Mishnah use the language that they said that they were in agreement? Hachi ka'amar le, Rabbi Yossi le Rabbi Meir. Maybe this is what Rabbi Yossi meant when he said to Rabbi Meir, Afilu le Rabbi Hoshua de Meka. Excuse me. Only a bit barrel. Okay, even according to Rabbi Yoshua, who's lenient, ki mekil betluya utmea. Where is he mekil? In the example of burning truma that is intermediate, okay, that we don't know its status for sure, whether it is tamei tahor, and burn that with truma that is tme'ah. That may be where Rabbi Yoshua is lenient. Aval b'tahora utme'ah lo. But in terms of burning that chametz truma that is clearly tahor, and burning it with something that is clearly chametz truma tameh, Rabbi Yoshua would not agree. That's what it may mean. Ihachi. Okay, he wouldn't go along with that. If that's the case, amai einahi hamida. If that's the case, why do we say then in our discussion in the Gemara that there's no comparison, that it's not a clear parallel to what our case was? Midah umidahi. Namely, it would seem to be that there is a clear parallel. To transmit impurity by burning an object prohibited, okay, by one law with an object, okay, or by Torah law with an object prohibited by rabbinic law. Isn't that what we're saying? Okay. That was the example that Rabbi Hanina said, based on a possible interpretation of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Yirmiyah, Hacha b'basar shenitma b'mashkin shenitma'u mechamat sheretz. Rabbi Yirmiyah now brings in another area. How did that meat that our Mishnah initially discusses, how did it become tameh? Through a liquid. And that liquid had become tameh through contact with the sheretz. So that meat is now what? Second, maybe third degree tameh. Va'azda Rabbi Meir l'tameh. And Rabbi Meir followed his own logic, his own reasoning. V'Rabbi Yossi l'tameh. And Rabbi Yossi followed his own logic and his own reasoning. Rabbi Meir l'tameh, Rabbi Meir followed his reasoning. Da'amar, because he says, Tumat mashkin l'tameh achirim, the Rabbanan, that liquid that conveys tuma to another object is only considered rabbinical tuma. But Rabbi Yossi l'tameh, and Rabbi Yossi, right, follows his reasoning. Da'amar tumat mashkin l'tameh acherim deoraita, that he says that liquid that causes other items to become tameh makes it a biblical level of tuma. Okay. Tanya, okay, as we just roll over a little bit, as we're taught, namely in the following Braita, Safek Mashkin L'Tameh Tameh, that when we have a doubt whether the liquid has become Tameh, we render and consider it Tameh. L'Tameh Acherim, to make other items Tameh Tahor. But then we say the other items, because of the doubt, are considered tahor, divrei Rabbi Meir. That is the view of Rabbi Meir. V'chein haya Rabbi Eliezer omer kidvarav. And Rabbi Eliezer held like Rabbi Meir's words. Whereas, on the other hand, Rabbi Yehuda omer lakol tameh. Rabbi Yehuda says anything touched by the liquid that's tameh is going to render the other item tameh. And we're going to stop right there today. Okay. Now, I did the best I could in trying to go through the Gemara. I went through it with Art Scroll and I went through it with Koren. So I hope that was adequate for today, guys. Okay. Everybody stay well and take care, all right?
Have a good day, everybody.
Take care.